Boom. All right. First of the year. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first episode of Vagabond Dog Industry Chats for 2021. Today we have Matthew White, CEO of WhiteThorn Games, a indie games publisher. Welcome. Thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So for those of you who didn't catch this week's streams, we played two games, Calico and Evans Remains. We managed to get through all of them, and it was very interesting games, unique in their art style for sure. But can you give us a brief overview of Whitethorn and um, Calico and Evans Remains and other games that you publish, and
Sure.
what's sort of like your
So every publisher's kind of got a shtick, right? When you think of a Devolver game, you think of sort of like a hard, pulpy pixel title, lots of explosions, lots of brains hitting the wall, that kind of thing, really difficult. We are sort of like the anti that. Not that Devolver's bad. A Katana Zero took up like probably 2 round trip Japan flights for me. But there's a whole market of people that want these sort of more relaxed, approachable experiences that aren't necessarily cultivated or curated by any one entity right now. So that's us. We try to find, boost, and support games that are chill, exploratory, experimental, laid back, that maybe don't require like an aggressive amount of focus and twitch to play. And the reason for that, I think, is that again, you see games like Animal Crossing doing tremendously well, Stardew Valley. I mean, there's a need here for games that address that kind of softer space. Historically, it's always the games I enjoyed playing too. Like I think I wore the Y button off my Super Nintendo playing the first Harvest Moon when I was a little kid. These kinds of experiences have always been super important to me. Things like Pokemon and sort of RPG forward type things, but not like cruel or punishing though. So I think most of our things end up being quite story focused, or exploratory in nature, and certainly that's the case with Calico and Evans Remains. Evans Remains by itself is basically a novel, with sort of puzzle elements that we made, skippable if you're having trouble, but it didn't diminish your experience of the story or anything. So that's our mission in a nutshell: is to cultivate these experiences that are a little more cozy, chill, approachable, and let people kind of cuddle up with a Switch or wherever they play, and relax a little bit. I think this year, particularly 2020, kind of showed us that there's a lot of money in that anxiety economy, they're calling it, right? Like CBD drinks and weighted blankets and these things that are kicking around whose sole purpose, you fidget spinners, the whole sole purpose is to take people and mitigate their anxieties about the world. And I think for me, video games have always been something like that. And so games that require me to really crunch and sweat don't really, I think they just add to the anxiety. So yeah, sorry, I answered a short question with a
no?
long answer.
It's okay. Saves me from coming up with more. How did you get into that niche then? Like, was it like I've heard a lot of different stories about how publishers get started.
Hmm.
What was it a golden opportunity with one game that you just jumped on? Did you found yourselves with the intention of going for these kinds of games, or did it something else entirely? What was the
Kind of like sort of organic. So I was in AAA for a long time. Well, not like a crazy amount of time, but I was in AAA, and I was at PlayStation specifically at the time. And California is a little like dystopian sometimes, just cost of
oh yeah
living, things like that. Nothing wrong with it. I think it's beautiful. I go back all the time, but living there can be really tough, right? Like, I mean, especially if you work in games, you don't have 2 pennies to rub together by the time the day's over. Your commute's unbelievably long. You're never going to buy a house. Like, it's a tough place to live. And I've got wife, kids, so we wanted sort of a more family kind of place. So I took a remote job actually for a while doing data science work for outsourcing company called Keywords. They're huge. They own a bunch of different service provider companies around the games industry, things like localization, QA, data science, that kind of thing. So did that for a while, and while I was doing that, I sort of played with the idea of I moved to a city, Erie, right where I am now, Erie in Pennsylvania in the U.S., where there wasn't really a game scene, and I kind of started missing developers. So I played with the idea of this like pro bono kind of incubator space where, I just rent some space at a co-working space locally. I mean, they're not expensive. Um, and in exchange for some minuscule fraction of your eventual sales, I think originally it was like 5% or 2% or something. Because of the years in games, I'd just project manage you through the thing, help you work with Nintendo, that kind of deal. And rapidly, as we started showing games and whatnot, it was like, oh, we're a publisher. Like it just like that quite literally was
Right.
sort of like, oh, I'm doing publishing work now. We're a publisher, aren't we? And so, yeah, I mean, it just happened that the games, that I like and that I wanted to curate and help are those kinds of games. And so it really, rapidly the people we signed started saying things like, nobody else would take a chance on us because it's this like experimental thing, or it's this kind of student thing, story driven thing. Um, and then we started selling units and, doing pretty well. And I was like, oh, why aren't people taking a chance on you? Clearly there's a market here. So, that's kind of it. That's how we got here. I think the tricky thing for us has been figuring out a way to cultivate that audience because they exist clearly, right? Like if you look
Mm-hmm.
at the wholesome games community on Twitch or on Twitter or anything like that, I mean, like there's thousands and thousands of people following that, right? And they're all kind of in the same vein that we like to publish. Not every single one, but there's a lot of overlap there. And what's tricky for us as a publisher is it's really hard to like do traditional like ads,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if I just like take out a page on IGN and it's like, up on IGN I've got my game about cat butts or like bisexual rabbits or whatever. Like gamer dudes are not in for this. Like
Right.
that's not what they're here for. And so consequently finding appropriate advertising targets has been pretty tricky. We've advertised lookalike audiences from like people who follow the SPCA and people who follow Home and Garden TV, and like it's been a weird kind
Right.
of how to
Using the
actually
keyword. Yeah.
target. Yeah, like it's really hard to target because if we just go like gamers, like who Twitter thinks gamers are, really are not who we're selling games to, right?
Right.
Like even in the slightest. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a big Venn diagram. People like all kinds of games. So somebody who's like playing Call of Duty might finish and be like, "Man, I want to chill out." And then, hop over to something more chill. So there is some Venn diagram. And we're cool with that. I don't care who you are. We love people who love our games. They're great. The audience has been really supportive. So I want to be clear that we're not only advertising to these adjacent
Mm-hmm.
folks. It's just that by and large, somebody who's coming to see a AAA release is not there for like a quirky indie game about cats, right?
Right.
So I'd say that's probably our challenge now. I see one of your chat folks, Miss Perfection, says found it through TikTok. That's awesome. Yeah, we there's like a man, Calico goes crazy on TikTok.
Really.
Actually, I think it's like just that it's so squishy. Like there's a word for it in Japanese that I've since forgotten. I was talking with Nintendo a few days ago, but there's a name for the squish, like the specific squishiness of like UFO catcher toys and
Gotcha.
like cats that you can like. And there's something about that like tactile squish that you get with Calico that I think
Gotcha.
is really
One of those
rewarding.
onomatopoeia words. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like it's almost asmery. Like it has a
Right.
weird like. Yeah, I don't know
The
exactly.
the it's I mean like I got a couple questions off of that. Um, one about the inflection point of like when you realized you were doing publishing, but also like like how well is Steam, which the tag system is so vital into categorizing it and the recommendation algorithm in Steam. Like, is it playing well with these kind of games? Like, are you finding it able to categorize you properly, or is it still something that like you need to like find the way through there?
There's kinks. I don't want to, throw any of our
Mm-hmm.
partners under the bus, but I mean, there are absolutely kinks to the way Steam sorts our titles. Yes. Few reasons. I mean, so first, there's not, depending on the game, there's not really a great label, right? So if we think about Calico in particular,
Mm-hmm.
the easiest way to describe Calico is sort of like Animal Crossing like,
Right.
or like Octodad but cat butts. Like it's easier to kind of anchor it to a title it's sort of like, I grew up in Canada. It's sort of like how Canadians always describe themselves. We describe ourselves with what I call like a series of knots, right? So we'll say like, okay, well, we're not British, but we're also not American. We're
Yeah.
not quite French. And
Yeah.
it's like, right. And so sometimes it's hard to define it really clearly. Like if I'm doing an arena shooter, it's an arena shooter, right?
Mhm,
If
mhm.
it's a racing game, it's a fucking racing game. Like it's clear what the thing is. Evans Remains comes close because it's kind of a puzzle platformer,
Yeah.
but it's also kind of a visual novel. And those just and then that's kind of what you got. But many of our games really do not play well with genre. One of our upcoming ones, Lake, which is a series first on Xbox Series X title, NPC. But even that one is, I mean, it's Life is Strange like, it is Telltale Games like,
Right.
but not quite, right? And so we have a hard time nailing exactly what it is, because it is new, right? Like not to say that chilled out games are new, right? Like, I mean, again, Harvest Moon was in 1991 or something. So that's
Right.
certainly not new. But as a movement, this is kind of new, right? Like that there's a whole slew of games coming out that are like, hey, don't stress at all, just chill out. Like that's a newer thing. I mean,
Mhm.
new relatively speaking. Um, and so the algorithm is algorithmic in that it does most things automatically. But speaking from a former data science background, it does need somebody to put the actual thing together first before it goes and learns. And so, you'll see the tag system on Steam update occasionally,
Mhm.
and they'll add new stuff that previously wasn't there and that kind of deal. Actually, this is an interesting thing because I haven't looked at our tags in a while. Let me see what's on here. Yeah, I mean, so a lot of these are like true, right? So you think about like casual, indie, cute, female pro tags, simulation, not really. Some of them are just factual, like single player.
Yeah.
Like okay, like I mean, 3D, right? But so the tags that our marketing agency suggested that we put on that were casual indie, RPG, female protagonist, single player, cute.
Hmm,
And
hmm.
so those are the ones we added. But then of course, customers add their own, right? So we have like LGBT, which is true, family friendly, life simulation, those kinds of things. So I think as more tags get added, there's two things it does. This is good and bad. So tag, you familiar with like and searching and or searching,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So it's like when you search X and X and X, the search results get smaller and smaller and smaller, right? So searching with tags is or searching. Every tag you add adds more results. So the inevitable problem that Steam has to get out in front of is there's no curation, right? Steam is it's just a wide open shovel mouth waiting to receive your hot trash garbage. And unfortunately, and this is not a secret, like of the thousands of games that hit Steam a month, 990 of them are somebody made something and then they were like, hey, fuck it, throw it on Steam, it's $100.
Yeah. Oh, I've done that.
um at best, right? At worst, they're like intentional asset grabs, like
Yeah.
of people being like who are really not devs. They just download something, package it, put it on there, name it something silly, sell it for 25 cents.
Hmm.
And then they pull $2,000 and they're like, haha, I got some money, and just fucked like 700 legitimate developers that are
Hmm.
trying to actually get, products out there. So it's tough because it is just totally curation free. Um, but there's an argument to be made there that Valve sticks to, and you got to admire them for that. That they say it's democratic, right? It's the idea that what people want is what rises to the top,
Hmm.
not and they'll say this if you speak with Valve. It shouldn't rely on people having handshaky relationships with consoles. It shouldn't rely on, you being the kind of golden boy. It shouldn't rely on there being, backdoor deals happening where you actually get onto something. It shouldn't just be friends and buddies that make it on. It should be a democratic process where the best things rise to the top. And that's true, except I mean, it is true. Like it's true. It's an equitable way to make sure anybody anywhere can put out an indie game. This means, you know, and I'll say this on record, the barriers to entry on Steam are lower for like a marginalized person, a person of color, people who don't have access to high-speed technology, people who can't afford to travel to GDC, whatever, to Steam than they are to like Nintendo. So the good side of that is equity. It means that everybody's given an equal playing field. Brand new student who just graduated, queer couple, disabled person, whatever, same access. That's great. There's literally no way to like shake a stick at the fact that that's an awesome way to be able to like have a grand equalizer. Here's the other side of that coin. Consumers don't have infinite patience. So what ends up happening is if there's a shopping mall and I give you $20 and I say buy whatever you want, that's extremely paralyzing, right? Like you only have this $20. It's the Chinese buffet thing. We call this choice fatigue. So the idea is it's way easier to choose between tomato soup or chicken soup rather than any soup you want in the world. The choice is just simpler. And so there's a literal effect in psychology that the more choices I give you, like the less eager you are to make that decision. You'll get more, there's dread that starts to pile up when there's more and more and more choices. If you've ever thought about the backlog effect, right? Like it's a joke in games now. You look at your backlog and you don't look at that with like joy. You look at it with dread, right? Like you look at it like it's a job. And that's weird, right? Like if you think about it from the origins, a stack of game cartridges when you were 7 looked like heaven, right? Like I'm going to go through all of these. It's going to be awesome. Like it was a good thing. But now there's suddenly though, if instead of like 5 games, it was like a warehouse and I was like play every fucking one of them. It suddenly it's a chore. So the good side of what Steam's done, equitable access to everybody. I think that's a value that they stick behind and I think that's important and that part is commendable. Downside, there is so much on there that now they're in a place where it's like, how do we deliver the best content to customers? And the answer that they've used is like learning algorithms. So like a la Netflix. And that's good because it's likely to suggest to you things you already like. But it also has the Facebook effect where it's likely to suggest to you things you already like, which means your tastes become more and more narrow over time as you suggested more and more similar things to the things you already enjoy. So, you know, Elon Musk made a tweet about this yesterday, which I thought was hysterical, where it was like he had dominoes and it was like Mark Zuckerberg and it was like, this is what we call the domino effect. And it's like, I'm going to make a website to rate cute girls in college. And then the last domino was the US Capitol has been overthrown by a man in a Viking helmet. And the gag here is that the more news I serve you that you already agree with, like the narrower and narrower and narrower your focus of learning and knowledge and reading and listening and thinking becomes, because stuff that's fed to you algorithmically, you already know and you already believe. There's no challenging what's already in your head. So obviously with video games, there's less criticality to this. I mean, we make video games. If we screw up, nobody dies, planes don't fall out of the sky. The worst case, you just get fucking Coochie Blaster 64 leaving you a shitty Steam review. Like that's as bad as the criticality is on Steam. But I love how your Streamlabs like warns you to update your own GitHub. We need something like that. Yeah. So anyway, what I was getting at here is that, I really like these life sim type games, right? So if someone enjoyed my made up nickname. Anyway, that's actually the result of, hold on a sec. Yeah, I'm just gonna go off the rails for like half a second. You'll really enjoy this. So that's an actual response to a really stupid review we got on Steam like 2 days ago. Sorry, 1 second, I'm gonna find it. You're gonna love it. And I don't know if I can throw a link, but if you can.
You can. You can just drop it in the
chat. I can?
Yeah,
okay, cool. Yeah, all right. Yeah, all right, cool. So, 1 second, 1 second. Where the hell is it? There it is. Oh my god, this guy. So, someone just left and you can, your chat can read it whenever. Someone left a review on Calico. And I mean, I blanked out his, username and everything to not be a jackass. But somebody, left a review, and we've moderated it and removed it since. But it, it was just LGBT agenda not advertised. And I was like, oh, despite the fact that the tag system says LGBTQ in big letters. But anyway, this was me. I normally don't touch it. Like, it's our community manager. But I was like, oh no, this guy's getting murdered. And I lit him up. But anyway, so that the Coochie Blaster name was a joke about this jackass. Anyway, so where I was going with that is obviously low criticality. So it's not a big risk, if you only serve people content they
Right.
like, except that they never discover stuff they might also enjoy, right? Like, for all I know, there's a shooter out there I might be in absolute love with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I log on to Steam right now, all of my recommendations are life simulators, visual novels, and building simulators.
Yeah.
All of them. And those three genres by themselves probably have 43 quad fucking rillion games on Steam. So, like, I have to, in microtransactions and in purchase behavior, we talk about the number of steps between a customer and then getting the product they want, right? So what you try to do with inexpensive things like indie games, inexpensive generally speaking, in that they're like 10, 30, like well under AAA price. You try to minimize the number of interactions between seeing the thing and buying the thing, right? So this is why in a supermarket, there's all of those kind of impulse things at the end of the aisle. They're like lighters and gum and shit you don't really need, but it's just there and you see it and you buy it. Like that. That's minimizing an inexpensive product with a high margin. So games have an unbelievably high margin because digital titles don't cost anything to produce. You just buy them and then you have them. That's that. And so what this means is that that their sales need to be quick. Like, generally speaking, we need someone to see a game they want of ours, buy it, and that to be a very quick transaction. So if it's buried under 6 layers of them having to search for it, it becomes really difficult to actually monetize the thing. So for better or worse, you live and die on Steam by staying on that front page.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing else matters. Literally nothing else matters. So our strategies with Steam are fundamentally different than how we do our advertising strategies on every other console.
Interesting.
The strategy on Steam is just rampage the algorithm with as many players as you possibly can, as fast as you possibly can, to stay on the front page, because literally Steam isn't about making quality content, it's about beating the algorithm. Like,
Yeah.
if it's literally just about that. Am I like lagging for you, or is it just on my end?
No, you're good.
Okay, good. Yeah, because my camera preview's kind of jumping around. That's
It's
okay.
You're all fine.
Yep.
Yeah, one of the things we've talked about on the channel and with other guests is the necessity to create the snowball to throw down the hill when you're dealing with the algorithmic system.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious. What are the methods you use to get that flood of users at the start of a game's launch?
Yeah, I mean, so wish lists are a big thing, right? So we'll spend like a year or more, drumming up wish lists, which complicates things with consoles. And I mean, I'm not sure if like Valve thinks about this, but I'll address that in a second, Minty. Pay people to play your game. That's not a terrible idea, except like you need 100,000, 200,000 people.
Yeah.
So it's expensive to pay that many people to play a game that you might be selling for $6, So it's tricky. Wish lists are big. We try to have like guaranteed at least 10, 15,000 minimum on launch. Otherwise, there's like, you're not even, one of our titles when we were early in this Bombfest, I mean, it was on the front page for 11 minutes.
Yep.
And I mean, and then it was pushed off by like 14 hentai visual novels, like, come out every 2 seconds on Steam. So, there was a point where 3 other publishers and I, not named, drinking at GDC, were like, I don't know why we were like depressed because Steam had done a thing where the day our games launched, they didn't tell anybody they were doing this, and EA put all their titles on Steam, and it just fucked all of our titles right off the front page. And there were 4 of us just like drinking our faces off, being like, I'm gonna like just quit, and we're all gonna fucking throw in $100,000 a piece, and we're gonna make a hentai VN asset flip company.
Yeah.
And all we're gonna do is just get 3 talented perverts in here to just draw the most lascivious stuff we can possibly come up with, wrap it around drugstore level dialogue, and just shit them out one a day. Like, absolutely just pound them out until something hits. Until you hit enough kinks that it goes to the top of the algorithm. Like, it's hard because the other side of the equity coin is that your algorithm can bury people who put their entire hopes on being on there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know what the right answer is. The spectrum of showing games to customers on one end is absolute curation. So this is like an Epic or a Nintendo. Well, not entirely,
No,
but
no.
I'm not at liberty to fully discuss all of that, but a highly curated experience, like, when you go to a restaurant and there are 6 items on the menu. Or the other end of the spectrum is an absolute open marketplace, itch. Literally no review process whatsoever. You can put anything you want on here. Um, and those are 2 very different kinds of approaches to sales. One is completely laissez-faire, market demand, and the other is completely what they call king making at Steam, right? Like that, the hand of God comes down and says,
Mm-hmm.
you are going to be on the front page of the Xbox store or whatever for a month. And so, yeah, I mean, there's merits on both ends. So this, I want to be clear, isn't me just absolutely telling, Valve to take a hike. There are problems with the other approach as well, right? Like you look at Game Pass, Xbox Game Pass, which is the best deal in games right now. Just, I mean, for consumers as well as developers, it's a tremendous experience. But there are some publishers that are overrepresented on there, like literally every single Devolver Digital game is on there.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are others that are underrepresented on there who've had major hits last year. I mean, even if you ignore us, we're not on there. But there are many other highly profiled games that came out in 2020, indies that were tremendous that are nowhere near there and haven't been seen. So that's the other side of the coin where, then you get people frustrated about, well, why do you keep putting these people in the spotlight and not us? So there's not a great answer for this. But to further your point about what techniques we use, yeah, Minty mentioned that had no idea wish listing was so important. Literally before a game launches, like pre-launch, afterwards not so much, but pre-launch, there's almost nothing more important you can do for a developer than wish list their game on Steam. It's literally up there with like just mailing me money. Like it's probably the single most important action you can possibly do prior to launch. Um, yeah, literally, if just every person who was sort of an empathetic gamer and cared about devs, like just went through their discovery queue every single week, every single day if you want, once a day, just take 5 minutes, go through your discovery queue, wish list anything you even remotely want to support. Even if your wish list becomes this unusable nightmare with like 65,000 things on it, that really tremendously helps the devs, drive content because so for example, on Steam, there's that popular upcoming list that you'll see, like games that are popular that are about to come out. And when a game is going to come out, it slowly ekes its way up to the top of popular upcoming based on its release date. And so that provides these last few days of visibility. The downside is is that a Karen emoji? I love that. If you don't have like minimum 10, 15,000 wish lists, you don't even get on that list ever. Your game just comes out and it gets thrown into the shit pile. So yeah, Minty, it's probably already an unusable nightmare. Mine is already an unusable nightmare. So wish listing's weird. It's not like it's like a gesture more than it is an actual tool for customers anymore. That's the other problem with Steam. Infinite choice means I don't know. There's probably friggin' 6,000 things on my wish list or something. Like I look back and I'm like, I don't even remember looking at this game. Like it's probably 2 years ago. Yeah. So that's a tricky thing in and of itself. Another strategy, of course, we use is we seed keys and streamers and reviewers, and so Sweet Anita played Calico on launch. That was hugely helpful. It was sponsored. We sponsored her to play it. And that 2 hours of somebody with that many followers playing, and somebody who's sort of that, she's streaming literally right now with 4,000 people watching her literally talk. So that level of power. Other streamers see that, and then they see, oh, what's this Calico game in the Twitch database that Sweet Anita's playing, and then it goes onto their schedules. And so that's one way for us to seed an awful lot of keys and an awful lot of launch day eyeballs, which will generate sort of organic traffic to the page, which is another piece of the algorithm that they use to drive it higher up the store.
Is that do you get the did you get streams sponsored streams before release?
Usually we are queuing them up well before release, but
Gotcha.
generally speaking, for Steam, that first like 24, 48 hours is like all that matters.
Right.
And you'll pop up so occasionally you'll come back up to the top, and that's really odd, and it happens occasionally, but we're really, after years of doing this, I have no idea what makes that happen.
Right.
Because we're back on new and trending now for some reason, and we've been out for like a month, and I'm not complaining. It's great. I'm right at the top of Steam. But like, I have absolutely no idea how that happened. In terms of all of the things they advise you to do regarding your algorithm, we should be lower, as far as I know. But the back end is,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So, I mean, we've talked a lot about the different methods we take to try and do the best we can within the algorithmic system. It was me streaming it, yeah, for sure. No. Let's talk a bit more about the publishing side of things. So, what is like this is obviously one of the things that you bring to the table as a publisher when you partner with a developer, is that you're going to try and help bring that, you know, early snowball to the party on release, because as you said, you know, it's not hard for a developer to release their own game. Anybody with $100 can throw their game on Steam, no
Correct.
question. So in addition to things like arranging sponsored streams, arranging advertising buys, what are the things that you guys do best and
Sure.
that you've done really well for your partners?
I mean, I would say ask them, but what I would like to kind of think we're good at, you know, so making a game is an odd thing. It's a bit like you know, making a band, right? Like when you're a 15-year-old angry kid with a drum set and you're thinking about, I'm going to be in a band, you're not really thinking about anything but the drum set, right? Like, and maybe the guitar and the bass, you know, nobody thinks about the bass, but the guitar and the singer and the, you know, that's what you're thinking about. You're not like, how are we going to distribute a record in China based on Spotify's regulations over there? Like, who the hell thinks about that, right? So if you're brewing beer, you're not thinking about what are the distribution rules for alcohol in all 51 states and 3 territories. Like, why the hell would you think about that? You're thinking about how to brew beer. So unfortunately, though, the reality is there's making a product and then there's selling a product. Most game design schools and game development schools teach you how to make a game,
Mm-hmm.
and that's good. But that is a career path that prepares you for AAA, like where you're going to be making the thing and someone else is going to be selling the thing. If you look at internal AAA studios, so like wholly owned studios of Microsoft or Sony, whatever, Nintendo, like they don't have like a production department that manages the distribution. That's part of the entire Sony package, right? So
Right.
like you're dealing with a Sony group that's doing data science, a Sony group that's doing marketing, a Sony group that's doing your socials, a Sony, and so on. And that's what that publisher provides to all of its wholly owned subsidiaries. If you think about the publisher relationship between a AAA maker like um, Game Freak and a AAA publisher like Nintendo, they're the publisher in that situation, right? So Game Freak and the Pokemon Company, and to some degree Nintendo, are in a co-dev relationship where Game Freak's the primary developer with the Pokemon Company, who's sort of the rights and IP holder, and then you have Nintendo that acts as publisher co-dev. And so that's what we do, just on kind of a mercenary basis because we're indies. We don't, you know, I can't walk up to Supergiant and be like, "Hey guys, I loved Hades, I love Bastion, I love Transistor. I want to acquire you for $385 million and have you be a wholly owned subsidiary of WhiteThorn Games and make games for us forever, and we'll provide all the publishing services." Like, I can't do that. Even if I could, I don't think I would. But you know, so instead, indie publishers act like you know, one-off mercenary joinees. So most of the people we've signed, if not all, but many of the people we've signed, don't have like a person who's responsible for things like porting your game to consoles, making a relationship with consoles, thinking about things like ESRB ratings, trailers, advertising, reaching out to marketing, localizing your game for different markets, complying with different ratings boards, doing physical publishing, building a merchandise presence, renting space at booths, applying to various festivals and conferences back when those things happen. Codev needs, like if we have a last minute need for art assets or something, quality assurance, user interface. There's a million things that a publisher takes care of that, generally speaking, let the developer do what they do best, which is make games. Simon Carlos, who runs a series of video games industry analysis blogs and sites, did a thing on the Christmas Day Games Bump. And in that, more importantly, he pasted this image that we put up on Twitter that I think kind of quantifies out what a developer actually does. And I'll throw it in the chat. I hate that long ass link that oh god, that link is like the worst. Sorry, 1 second. Yep. Sorry about that. There it is. Okay, cool. So it's in this article anyway, about 2/3 of the way down the page on Gama Sutra. I apologize for the hideous link. Mm-hmm. So, this quantifies in a breakout blow by blow, like what we're actually giving you. So a lot of the things that, there's a sort of a transparency push a few days ago. I guess it's like a week now. Time is meaningless at the moment. Was that before or after the Capitol building fell? And it's kind of like I'm just thinking about tragedies and putting them in as breadcrumbs. Anyway, so bunch of people released their publishing contracts. Raw Fury did, we did publicly, so people could just peruse them. And so one of the things that's sort of vague in both of those contracts is what we're actually doing for you, right? And that's quite intentional because the relationship between a publisher and an indie is quite bespoke. So sometimes people have a business person on the team, and they don't really need things like business analytics or pricing consultation or market work or anything like that, because they already have that human. What they really need is like technical assistance porting, introductions to consoles, deal brokering, and some marketing help. And then in that case, that's what we focus on, and we make a judgment and an offer, which is not set in stone. They're all offers based on what we think we can add, where we think we can help, and what we think that's going to be worth in terms of what it costs us to do it. And that's how we arrive at our percentage. On top of that, publishers also fund you, right? So you may come to us and be like, I need $200,000 to finish this game. Help. And we will, in some cases. Obviously, we're going to be very selective because, again, we're indies. We can't just write $1 million checks left, right, and center. But it is something that we try to help with. Broken down in that image, if you get a minute to chew on it sometime. There's business stuff, there's asset stuff, there's PR stuff, and there's technical stuff, broadly speaking. And all of those are broken down farther and further and further into what we're actually doing for you at any given moment. And it can be really varied. I remember one of the first games we were launching, we were staying in an Airbnb at E3, and dude was scheduled to go on GameSpot's live stream at E3 as to show off his game. And literally, because this is developers, they touch the code before the game goes to a show. Yep. He accidentally introduced this bug where for whatever reason, if he hit the B button on the Xbox controller, it would crash to desktop. And I have no idea why, probably an infinite loop. But literally, anytime someone touched B, game would just gone right to the desktop. And so that's a problem, right? Because the streamer, the person who's going to be playing the game on stream, is not the developer. It's some guy or girl who's going to be holding it while they interview the developer. And the first thing a person's going to do when they grab the controller is try every button, right? And so they're just going to nuke that fucker to the desktop. And you can't reach across and be like, hey, don't press this button, because then you look like a jackass, right? So it was to quit on the pause menu. Yeah, Brian was the developer. He's in the chat. And so anyway, what ended up happening was so we didn't have enough time to recompile a game because compiling the whole thing takes hours. Yep. And we found this bug like minutes before we needed to be there. So I took a lighter and a butter knife or a pocket knife and opened the Xbox controller that we were going to provide them and soldered the B button off on the inside. And then closed it back up. So to this day, kicking around our office is an Xbox 360 controller with a non-functioning B button. So what you actually do minute over minute is very different. Like today I was like working on HVAC on a building. That's why I'm in like grubby clothes. Like it's goofy. It's our office building. Um, I mean, we're taking out a billboard for Calico to test in-person advertisement for games to see how that works out.
Hmm.
Like it's weird. Like your day over day is really weird and really bespoke, and that's one of the reasons that contracts with folks like us are so.
Oh, he froze. Um, yeah, no, I can imagine how. Well, we'll wait for him to get back, but there when you're in the live situation, like you definitely have to solve problems. If you are a developer, it can be really easy to just like come completely overwhelmed by the like pressing nature of the issues at hand. Hold on, gang. Give me 1 second. I'll see if I can reconnect the call. I'm gonna throw you on the pre-roll show.
Yeah,
There
sorry,
we go.
you're good. Discord just crashed to desktop.
The internet has been really weird today. Twitch went down for a whole bunch of time, like while we were in the middle of our stream earlier. Yeah. Well, anyway, looks like we're all safe now.
Yep, good. Like I said, Discord just literally directly to desktop, so it's fine. It's back.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can summarize. In addition to big bags of money, if occasionally, some bigger than others.
They're bags of money anyway.
Bags of money. Some bags of
their
money.
bigness varies depending on what the developer needs.
Right.
But I mean, that's also how we assess our risk, right? Like, yeah, exactly, Dave. Somebody hit me at Discord HQ and crashed
Nice.
its desktop. Get the soldering gun. It depends on. It's all about risk. Like I'm going to take a higher percentage if I think it could potentially really hurt us, or if it's going to cost us a tremendous amount of work and money.
Right.
So on the other hand, if it's like our game's already out on Steam and porting it to be nil difficult, and we basically just need a teeny bit of support, then we're not going to take a whole lot. Then it becomes more of a brand building exercise for us.
Right.
We tap out at 25. That's where we're like, because past that point, I mean, you're making less than 50% of your game by the time we take our cut and the platforms take their cut and you pay taxes and that kind of deal. So, we don't want to go any higher than that. Just, I mean, it's, I don't know. People are going to differ on their opinions about this too. Like Raw Furies is like starts at half and has, they've got like a 15% inflation recoup on their funding and stuff. Everybody's got a different contract, but in any case, I mean that's just where we sit. I don't want to really get into the weeds on that one too much, but we try to take a lower cut.
Yeah, we went over like part of the earlier stream. We took a look at it. I mean, these are both public documents now, and hopefully more come. But I mean, we'll get into we can get into the nitty gritty of some of it later. But like, I'm curious what. I understand the process from Raw Fury because I watched the thread, the relatively lengthy thread. Torsen started about transparency, and that it ultimately led over the course of a year to them eventually releasing the publicity of their document. What made you guys want to reveal or show your cards or reveal the document for your side?
I mean, so sort of three reasons in descending order of benevolence. First, I mean, it's good. It's good to have these things out in the open because devs honestly don't know what they're getting into a lot of the time. I like to think neither Raw Fury nor we are predatory, but there are predatory investors and publishers. There are investors, for example, that act simply as investors. Like they will just dump money into your pocket and that's it. And now you're culpable to them. There's no other support. It's just a golden guillotine. And so that can be an abusive predatory relationship where either you're going to get a big chunk of their game or you're going to sue them for the money you just gave them. Like that kind of thing does exist. So I think seeing other people's contracts and having a basis for comparison provides developers with ammunition to not get fucked, basically. And I think that's important. So contributing to that was meaningful and important for us. Another thing that's important, I think, is we wanted to jump on to show that contracts are going to differ, naturally because of how they're written and the kinds of different jurisdictional necessities, whether one is framed as a contract like theirs is, or one is framed as like a limited service agreement over time like ours is, changes the language. And neither good nor bad, but important that you should compare. So I think that was another reason. The sort of neutral reason is we don't anywhere specify that any of that's confidential. We have a confidential clause in there, but it pertains to stuff relating to the consoles, platforms, and game development. It doesn't pertain to our legal documents. You can share them all you want. So there was no reason not to. It wasn't like it was sorry, I get the yawns. It wasn't like a risk for us of any kind to just say, yeah, whatever, here you go.
Right.
Like it. So
Any one of your partner developers could have revealed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there would be no, like, with total impunity. I mean, they can talk all about the rate we gave them, like, whatever. It's fine. It's not confidential. One of the things that should scare you about an employer is when they tell you can't talk about your salary with other people, right? Because, I mean, that's just a strategy to keep poor people poor. And so, we don't want to feel like we're in a power relationship where I'm putting all these impositions on you because I have a bag of money and you don't. Rather, we want it legitimately to be collaborative. Of course, we want to make money. I mean, duh, that's what we're here for. But at the same time, we want to do that in a way that doesn't make one party have tremendous power over the other party. It should feel like a mutual greed. We'll come together and do a thing that we couldn't do alone, either of us, and then together we'll both make some money. The selfish reason is I personally believe, because I'm CEO of this company and not Raw Fury, I personally believe we have a better contract. So, I wouldn't draft a worse one. I mean, we're out here to compete, right? So, consequently, just from a personal standpoint, and I mean that I don't think, to be clear, that if you get a deal from Raw Fury, you should not take it. I think they're a tremendous publisher. Everyone over there works like dogs to support their games. Every one of them is a really, really good citizen of the games industry. They support tons of initiatives that are really awesome, like the Guerrilla Collective, and put money into underprivileged devs left, right, and center. So please don't take that as a slight. Just from a strong standpoint, I think we have a better contract. That's all that is.
Gotcha. Then given the awareness of this contract now, what has the response been? Have you had more interested devs? Have you had people bring up like issues with the contract? What are some of the highs and lows of it?
So a few things. I mean, day after we posted that, we got like 15 pitches in our hello at email. So I think certainly people liked the terms at the very least. We can't take every pitch. We don't have infinite money or infinite time, so we have to be quite selective. And of course, we're really brand. We're strict on our brand. We want to make sure we're, getting those kind of cozy, cute games, not just anything. Even if it's a tremendous game that we think will do really well, if it's like, like a hardcore shoot 'em up, we're not going to touch that. So we'll usually pass that off to one of our other publishing partners because, there's no point in being just. We don't like. Don't tell Raw Fury about this, otherwise they'll get it and they'll make lots of money. It's not a zero-sum game where we, try to hide it from. It's just if it doesn't fit our brand, we'll happily be like, hey, do you want an intro to another publisher that we think would be way better fit for this? And they do that too, right? Like they've given us games that like, look, this is beautiful and quirky and weird and no one that plays our games would buy it. Do you want to check them out? Like that's happened. So it's collegial in that regard. I would say the biggest thing is people got really confused over the gross versus net discourse was really kind of stupid, to be honest. I mean, I'm not trying to, whatever, we're on a stream. I guess I'm just going to shoot the shit. So like, there's a lot of terms in business that have real meanings, but the annoying thing about business terms is they also usually are co-optings of other words that already have a meaning. Think about like organic, for example. When I say organic produce, that means something, right? But that word already had a meaning. Like contains hydrocarbons is literally the meaning of that word. So if you can show me a watermelon that doesn't contain hydrocarbons, I will show you a rock shaped like a watermelon is what you're left with. So consequently, the word means something different when you're using it in a different context. Most people commonly understand gross and net to be very simple. Gross, the very first amount of money, net, whatever I have left over. That's true. So from that assumption, people thought that this meant, for example, if you bought my game for $10, say we have a 10% contract just to make numbers easy. You purchase one of my games for $10, then you immediately return it. Well, the dev still owes me $1 because the gross was $1.
That wasn't my reading of the greater.
So that's gross proceeds. So what we're talking about is like gross revenue. So yeah, of course we're not going to charge you on a game you returned. That's absurd. Like that wouldn't hold up in a court ever, anywhere. So the idea is we're charging on gross revenue. The reason for this is really simple. First of all, it is extremely easy to calculate. If you're selling a $10 game, I don't have to think about currency. I don't have to think about anything. How many units did you sell? What is the gross amount that went into the bank account? Take off 10%, easy calculation. Now, the question then becomes like, well, what if you sell it at less than $10? Do they still owe you, $1 each? No, because again, this is gross revenue. The reason we put it in there primarily was because at the time we were serving a bunch of student games. And so when we were early on, because we were small, right? Like we had to compete, so we worked with smaller publishers, smaller developers, and we still do time to time. But early on, we were working with a lot of student developers. Many student entities, like the NYU Game Center and things like that, take a small amount of equity or revenue in exchange for the services that they provide to the students. Which makes sense. I mean, that's a way for them to run an extracurricular thing and pay for itself. But we didn't want us to be in a situation where now we're paying the NYU Game Center for a game that we release and create this odd loop of liability. So what we did was with gross, it's very simple. If you sold the game for $10, I take my dollar before you pay NYU a dime. And then I'm out of the equation and you settle up with whoever you owe money to. So that was or another really common scenario that I'm sure you've seen in indie titles is that a developer won't have any money, and to get the game made, they'll promise 3 or 4 people 5%, 6%, 10% of the final proceeds. I, as the publisher, don't want to be responsible for issuing 1099s to 7 people because you divvied that up. That creates an enormous tax and overhead on my end that makes me have to take more money from you because I have to pay more employees to do all this paperwork. So I wanted to literally be like, there is one check coming out of our company every month to your company, says royalty, this is the amount, here's the attached sheet.
Yep.
You go pay out your percentages to whomever you owe them to.
Right.
So it was a paperwork elimination move originally. On the internet, folks seem to see it as sort of this way for me to like sneak extra money, and it's not. And even if you calculate it out, even if that were true, you're talking about like a 2%, 1% difference, and that's so trivial that it wouldn't even make sense to. If you're gonna rob a bank, rob a bank. Don't rob a Salvation Army teller.
Oh,
like
someone's never seen Office Space.
I'm just saying, you're gonna get a felony for $5. Like if you're gonna get the felony, earn it. So there's no way I'm gonna be that evil for 1%.
I mean, but then in this situation, is NYU analogous to Steam or a publisher or a distributor's cut, the Xbox or Nintendo?
Yeah, so the way we math it out is we take them at the same time. So on a $10 game, if we have a 10% rev share, you get $6 because we get 1, Steam gets 3, you get the leftover.
Right.
So technically from net, you would get 2% more back if I took it from net on 10.
Yeah.
So again, it's a little number if.
Right. I mean, that also that assumes that distributor rates stay the same over time, right? That they can go. I mean, it seems that they're trending down.
The good news on this though means that if we get a deal, like if one of our games goes on Epic, like Calico, where they take 12%, we get the same amount of money. The developer just gets more. Yeah. Because remember, we're taking it from gross again. So that also benefits the developer in that sense, because Epic's taking, I don't know, some smaller amount than 30 for Calico. We'll just say 15 because it's easy to calculate again. So if Calico sells, or whatever, if $10 game sells and Epic takes 15 instead, we're still only taking our buck. Whereas from net, we'd be taking more because there'd be more left over. So a better rate in our contract benefits the dev, not us.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's one of the points that I've seen people bring up in the discourse about the contract. The one that I knowing how I develop games and the way I operate, it's the 100% recoup until it's back, as opposed to like even 90 or 80 or something like that. Because I find that with contracts. Here, if a publisher is providing a bunch of money, right? I want to put every single one of those dollars into the game. I don't want to have to reserve. I don't want to have to reserve, like 10% of it for the 3 months beyond launch and waiting for the recoup to finish off. How flexible are you guys in general with the contract in general in terms of like adjusting terms and these kinds of things? But
so in general, very flexible. We have 2 developers that take from net, for example. We have different rates for everybody. We have some that are downright wacky based on currencies. So, for example, Evans Remains, the developers in Argentina. Argentina has a very volatile currency. Right. So moment over moment, it can go from totally valuable to completely worthless. So our contract with him contains a bizarre escrow account where we hold US dollars for him and slowly eke it out in Argentinian pesos as they change. So in general, very flexible. Some of our devs are in Canada, they're in other countries where currency exchanges benefit them. So they'll be like, hold it until the currency's better. Like we're flexible. We're an indie. That's one of our benefits is that we're flexible. We literally encourage in our emails everybody to not sign the same day we give them the contract and say, like, read this, like, do not sign it. We have a lawyer who will help you with it for free. He's our lawyer, so you may not trust it, but you can get independent ones as well. Like, they'll explain every little line to you, because the worst case scenario for a publisher, it's a bit like a landlord, right? Like if you fuck your tenants and really take every last dollar from them, I mean, that's the analog of opening up the golden goose and taking the egg, right? Like they don't pay you anymore when they leave, right? Like they're gone at that point. So in this case, the worst case scenario is we get really close to launch and we have like a console deal lined up or something, and the dev is so disenfranchised and disappointed with how much we've absolutely been fucking reaming them that they don't hit the deadline, or they crunch themselves, or they're miserable, and then they tell their friends and they poison the well, and like that's what we don't want, right? So I mean, even if it means us making less money, we're always going to avoid that situation because it means a longer term, healthier brand. So we're going to be flexible wherever we possibly can be. The 100 recoup, you're right, it can be tricky and scary, and folks have pushed back on it, and we have made accommodations in the past, especially on larger sums. So when it's like 30 grand or 50 grand or something, most people are usually comfortable with the 100 recoup because it's going to be one pay period and it's going to be done. Like, unless the game does so poorly that we're all really struggling.
Right.
Which could happen, but is quite rare that it does that badly. On a smaller amount, especially since we're putting usually more than that in marketing that you don't recoup, right? And I mean, we're spending, like a lot of hours pounding the pavement to put you in front of every conceivable Google Stadia, Apple Arcade, Xbox Game Pass. It has never happened that we have had more than 2 pay periods to a recoup ever.
Did you just say your marketing is not included in the recoup?
Correct. Yeah, our marketing spend is on us.
Well,
because it wouldn't be
investment,
fair.
Right?
So think about it for a second. When I'm marketing your game, so Calico, right? Everyone that plays Calico does 2 things. Every single person sees our logo, and an alarming amount of them go follow us.
Right.
Which is fine. We didn't make the game, but we're the ones selling it. So what's interesting is this helps our clients. There's a lot of cross-buy between games in our portfolio. It's because all of our games serve. Do you have a hard schedule? I'm kind of like talking. Are you good to just? Okay. So there's a lot of cross-buy in our portfolio. Someone who picks up a game like Evans is probably going to like a game like Calico, is probably going to like games like Lake and Beasts of Marvia Island and Princess Farmer and the Forest Cathedral and other things that we're putting out this year. So yeah, Dave, sure. I mean, I'm here. Whatever. My kids are already conked, and what the hell else am I doing? It's the apocalypse. So there's like a good amount of cross-buy. So
Yeah.
it benefits us in our brand when more people play your games. It benefits us when your games sell more units because our top line revenue goes up. We get to report to investors more revenue, more revenue, more revenue, which looks better and is better. And we can employ more people. Our brand grows. These are all like good things, right? So when we're spending marketing your game, yes, of course the devs are benefiting, but that's missing the point. Putting the marketing recoup on them is making devs pay to build your brand, right? Like, I mean, that's literally like advertising a restaurant with the server's tip money. Like, and the argument is, well, if we advertise, you're going to get more tips. Well, yeah, but it's my fucking money and you're going to come into my restaurant
Right.
with it. Like, of course, it's true. It is absolutely a truism to say if I charge the devs for the marketing, more people will buy their game and they'll make that money back. That is true. However, I'm also going to benefit tremendously in every other game I ever sell, which these devs have no part in, because I'm spending money on marketing my brand that is carrying their game, if that makes sense. You understand what I mean? So like every game we release, and this is true of, I assume, every publisher, as long as you don't just start, shovelwaring crap out the door. But every game you release, your brand gets a little bigger, right? Like, when Raw Fury does Bad North, and then they do Atomic Crops, and then, like you start knowing them for more and more things, and their footprint on social media and in the world and across consoles gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and more powerful and more influential. And that, from my opinion only, is done with devs' money because you're making them recoup your branding effort.
Right.
Like, my branding effort is my branding effort. It's meant to headline the games we put out there. And if for some reason we have to make like an extraordinary or odd marketing request, we sometimes will request the dev, and there is a clause in our contract about this, if that's something that they would be comfortable putting into the recoup. So for example, we got an invite from a company in China. They want us to totally localize this 50,000 word thing to traditional Chinese and fly the developers out for an interview. And it's like, cool, this is going to be like 60 grand. And this is not something that's probably going to earn us 60 grand back in sales. So
Right.
can we have these on this thing? Like we have done things like that in the past. So it is quite bespoke. It's quite individual cases, but it'll always be reflected in the contract language.
Then, I mean, if you are, I don't want to say offering that, but if that's the situation where the marketing is paid for on your side, then
Yeah.
what sort of liberties do you take in terms of like how and what is used for marketing? Like, do you?
Can you be a little clearer?
Well, I mean, like you said, you're doing a billboard ad,
Yeah.
and like
That's
that
a
was
test.
yeah,
See how it goes.
right. And there's mention of the TikTok ads and these kinds of things, but like
Yeah.
a lot of devs will often be very specific about how their game is shown, these kinds of things. But what's your process for creating advertising or creating marketing?
Yeah. So we try to be a bit like, we ultimately the decisions with the devs. We've had some annoying things that devs have done in the past that we believe have hurt them and us. But, we, for example, recently got an interview request from a large news outlet you've heard of to see one of our upcoming titles. But the devs were like, it's not in the place we want to show it yet. And I'm like, this is literally like 100 million reader. Like,
Right.
you should do this. We're not going to do it. And I'm like, fuck. So we ultimately do leave it to the devs. So we ask devs if they're comfortable with the games we're signing, internally, if they feel like it fits the brand. We've had people object in the past to games that we had intended to sign on grounds of like team members being sexual harassers that we didn't know about and have not signed them as a result. So, we involve devs in our whole business. So what I'd like to say is we try to be like a mom about it, in the sense that sometimes we have to be a little firm and be like, you really should do this. We're gonna leave the decision with you, but it's gonna hurt you if you don't do this.
Right.
I'm not gonna force you, but so that has happened a few times. I remember Brian, who's probably still in the chat, maybe, was having like a freaking meltdown over trying to get his game out the door, because you do. When you get close to the end of a game, time seems to dilate.
Yep.
It gets really terrifying. Then we really had to have like, all right, let's go get a drink, and I am going to literally talk you through how you're going to get the rest of this done, and you're going to adhere to it, and we're not going to crunch, and we're just going to work steadfastly. And you do have to kind of be dad, mom, whatever sometimes. But I mean, like, that was helpful. The game got out the door. We sold probably 100,000 units of it by now. I haven't looked. But like, you sometimes need that kick in the butt from someone. So we sometimes act as what Canadians call the Senate, House of Sober Second Thought, right? Where, we take a moment to maybe temper devs' paranoia about things sometimes. So, like I said earlier, the majority of our developers, have no background in things like marketing or advertising and whatnot. And so, like saying, oh, we should put a TikTok ad out. And it's like, okay, well, the devs are like in their 40s and are like, I don't think anybody's on TikTok. And it's like, okay, well, you're wrong. And we have to be, kind of blunt sometimes about that, where it's like, all right, here's this stupid TikTok of us shaking a cat's ass on Calico we put up that has 195,000 likes on it. Like, that's more people than have ever engaged with our Twitter in the last 5 years. Right. So, occasionally we have to be a little blunt, but we're never forceful. I mean, if you, at the end of the day, you're like, I'm not comfortable with it, then fine. It's your game. So we're here to help. But, I can lead the horse to water, but generally trying to shove his head in there just gets us both drowned.
Right. It does get easy to, I imagine it does get easy to approve the marketing spends when it doesn't cost the developer a thing.
Yeah, Minty and Kittens there is a TikTok. I don't have the link. I mean, B there that's in the chat, BUTV, she's our community manager.
Gotcha.
She might be able to find it, but one of them has legitimately like 195,000 plus likes. And it's just literally, you got to play this game. It's got fucking cat butt, and it's TikTok's weird. It's like millennials are just sitting here while the world burns, drinking beer, and Gen Zs are just sitting dancing stupidly on TikTok while the world burns. But it's the same. It's just different coping mechanism.
Right. So then, I mean, I guess we can kind of aim to winding down. But like, what from here going forward for the rest of the year? What do you guys have planned? I mean, you can talk about releases. I mean, I know it's a very nebulous situation, but
yeah, sure.
Are you still actively looking for new projects?
Yeah, we're probably going to sign the fewer number this year because of the Rona and just being generally conservative with getting back to normal life. It's probably maybe 2-3 total. I would say would probably be looking at a couple now that are really nice and in portfolio. One of them is extremely expensive. We're trying. Yeah, but so this year in terms of releases, B in the chat, you can tell me if I miss one. But in January we have a Ground, which is a Terraria-like Minathon, but story-driven, so kind of an interesting one. It's a 100-ish hour game, not 1,000. So it's very, 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 very long, but it's very meditative and kind of zony, grindy. So I think we're kind of addressing a different anxiety beater that we haven't really touched yet, which is sort of that meditation kind of state. It's a great game. It's really well received on Steam. I'm hoping it'll do well on consoles coming later this year. Early this year, very soon. Additionally, we have Beans, which was a silly little coffee shop simulator that we made 1 million years ago that's coming to consoles this year. God, off the top of my head, there's Lake, which is a narrative-driven adventure game set in the 1980s about delivering mail in the Pacific Northwest. That's coming to Xbox first, as well as PC, and then other consoles afterward. We also have The Forest Cathedral from Brian, who's in there. That'll be late this year. Also Xbox first. Ooh, I don't know if that's public yet, but I didn't say that. It's coming to consoles and PC at the same time. Anyway, additionally, we have Calico going to NCL, like Japan, as well as PlayStation. Nice. That'll come later this year. We have some mobile releases coming this year. Things like Evans Remains is getting a mobile release. We're evaluating Calico on mobile, which is tricky because of performance concerns. There's Onsen Master. It's a 4-player, think like Overcooked plus Studio Ghibli meets Spirited Away. It's great. It's a lot of fun. And he's got a great Twitter following. We have Beasts of Maravilla Island, which is Pokemon Snap-like coming. Princess Farmer, which is a match 3 visual novel story game. I think we have like 10 releases this year. I just want to die. We also bought a headquarters building that we're renovating that'll open this year. I don't know. I think I'm doing a Series A investment round. Might have a couple of brain aneurysms. I don't know, man. This is a year. So much stuff got shoved into 2021 because of coronavirus.
I mean, you mentioned the investment round, and it does actually bring up a question that I've often had people ask. But I mean, how did you get started in the publishing business financially? Like, did you?
Literally worked 3 jobs. Literally, I was teaching at Penn State. I had a remote job, and then I did this as well.
And those 3 jobs provided the bags of money of various sizes?
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah, I literally worked 3 jobs and lived meagerly for quite a while.
That's
yeah, and then on top of that, we got some grants from so Pennsylvania's got pretty generous tax structure for video game developers, so we were able to take advantage of some of those early on. They're not much now. Like, I mean, it's like 20 grand and it's 20,000 hours of paperwork, and it's like,
yeah.
Like at the time, they were really helpful, and not so much anymore because of the size. There are bigger ones that are helpful, but they are even more paperwork, and you require like independent auditors and that kind of thing. So we're getting there. But yeah, it was a combination of grants and literally just working 3 jobs. I mean, some of the devs in here that are kicking around in your chat, Sam and Brian, were around when I was working the 3 jobs, and I was pretty fucked up most of the time. But it was, you're either going to suffer. What do they say? It's the path of the king or the path of the you either get rich or you stay the king. And the idea is like, I wanted to not sell out to like a VC. So even our seed round investor is an economic development like agency. It's not a a big VC firm or anything. We don't want to kind of get in bed with like private equity or anything nasty like that. It's going to be always like small family firms, people that are interested in the games industry, but and are patient and or interested in economic development. We don't necessarily want to hop in with like an oligarch or anything. We're it's a pump and grind kind of thing, and it's sort of antithetical to the type of work we do. Yeah, one of the reasons we're looking for it though is, I think I mentioned earlier, like, when we pay someone to fund their game, we have to do it over time, and that creates a burn rate, right? Like, it adds to the monthly spend that we have to do to stay alive. And I mean, our burn rate is substantial. I mean, we spend like $70,000 a month just in payroll before we've touched any of our game funding, any of our overhead, anything. And so, we have to be very careful not to go broke. So one of the reasons we raise around is because we want to be able to sign larger titles, like bigger games with larger teams, and have a bigger chance of really making a massive dent on charts on Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo. But having that much liquid capital in the bank requires either a game that goes Flappy Bird, that just prints fucking money, or I mean, you have to take investment. That's the only other way you can really do it, or debt. And I mean, debt is scary.
Right. And then in terms of like actually landing that game that does go Flappy Bird, do you think you've got the eye for it?
I don't think the eye exists. So every person, I tell you a secret about people with money. Everybody with money likes to play Dragon's Den.
Right.
Or Shark Tank,
Shark
whatever
Tank,
it's called down here. Yeah. But everyone wants to be Kevin Shitbag up there, Canadian Simon Cowell. What's his name with the comb over and the baldness? But everyone wants to be that guy. Right. They want to be, I have the discerning eye to tell you whether you're worth it or not. And they don't, right? Like, they don't. I mean, they have some experience. It's an educated guess, but it remains a guess, right? Like, it's a bit like asking a doctor to diagnose your stomach pain without any tests. It's just based on your intuition, your expertise. Give me your best guess. And yeah, I mean, you might be right, but you might not.
Right.
And are you willing to risk that? So we don't look for like, oh, at no point have I ever had a Back to the Future call where I'm like, that new sound you're looking for, get a
Right.
load of this. Like that has never happened, right?
Right.
Like it's more, do I chat with developers? Are they genuinely into the game they're making? Are they going to ride it out even if it's a shitstorm? Is it going to get out the door no matter what, come hell or high water? Is it on brand point? Does it advance a social message that I think resonates with the company we're building? And then we just put the work in. And then if
Right.
one of them goes hyper mega nuclear, then fucking great. And if it doesn't, we'll still be fine. Just nobody will be buying, yachts.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
that's something I've heard from multiple publishers, that it's the approval process is less about like as a developer, and this is for anybody who's going to be pitching in the near future or distant future in the chat. Like as a developer, you very much want to feel like you're pitching the next big game, but really proving your capacity to ship is
yeah.
is far more valuable.
I want to see
Uh,
you care about the product more than anything.
yeah.
That's literally the most important thing you can show me is like, oh no, even if you don't sign this, I'm making this game. Like I
Yeah.
want to see that you are an obstinate bastard who won't be kicked aside by the worst things life will throw at you, because that last week when the game's like just about to launch is the worst things life will throw at you. Like guaranteed. So that's what I want more than anything. Because I mean, we're partners, right? Like we're in the same fucking ship, and if one of us stops rowing suddenly, guess who's got to pick up the other oar?
Right.
So that's what's scary. And I mean, we have 19 IPs. I can't like redirect 100% of our resources to save you while you're sinking, and then spite our other 18 IPs. So exactly that. That's what we're looking for. Kittens, like, yeah, I'm making it, and I don't really care. I need the help. And I'll take your money,
Right.
but even if you reject me, I'm still making this game. Is what we want to hear. Um, Now sometimes there is a Dunning-Kruger thing where someone should tell you earlier that maybe don't make this game. But
Right.
and I've had games that I've made in my life where I'm like, God, I wish someone would have told me earlier that I was fucking this up so bad. But that's not a publisher's job. We're going to be kind and respectful. And if you want honest feedback, we'll absolutely give it to you. But it'll be the Canadian like compliment sandwich, right? Like where it'll be like, here's what's great, here's what's not great, here's what you did a great job on, and we'll kind of do it that way. But we'll always give you that feedback wherever possible. But I mean, not always. Like a lot of the time, people are just like, "What'd you think?" And we're like, it doesn't really fit our brand." And sometimes that's almost always true when I say that. But occasionally, it's also me, trying not to tell you like this is a student project and you should finish it because that's important, and you should do a postmortem because that's important. But you should not try to sell this, or you are going to be infinitely disenfranchised and hurt by how badly it's going to be received.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah,
Well,
that's
it's like I mean, if you thought about it like food for a minute, right? Like you cook a pizza, you burn it absolutely black, you drop it on the floor on the way to the oven, you put it back in the box, and you look at it, and it's like, all right, this looks like somebody ate Indian food and barfed in the fucking box, but I'm still gonna try to sell this thing. Like it's already in a place where it's like, okay, this was my first attempt. I've never cooked before. This doesn't look great. Let's focus on the things I got right and try to fix the things I got wrong. We're gonna
right.
change the timing on the oven. We're gonna not drop it on the floor. But we're certainly not gonna go sell it to somebody. Like that's sometimes when you're young, especially me too, you don't have the kind of foresight that you maybe shouldn't have
Yeah,
kicked
yeah,
out the door.
yeah. One of the things that we talk about a lot on this is a lot of people with their first project tend to put so much identity into it, and how
Yeah, it's
damaging
creating.
that can be when it's really just one point in your career, and people don't seem
Yes.
to realize they're gonna.
This brings us back full round circle to the Steam algorithm problem that many people, when they've been, told no by a publisher or whatever, will just kick it onto Steam anyway.
Right.
And then what ends up happening is it doesn't do well, and they're subjected to the full brunt of Coochie Destroyer 620, whatever, who just shows up in the Steam comments and is like, I hope your fucking house burns down and you get Lou Gehrig's disease. Like, and that's what the internet is. And that's not good for anybody. It's not good for the consumer. It's not good for the developer. So we try, and Dark, yeah, we do too. It's fine. You could literally make the second coming of Jesus Christ, and yeah, you'd get. I didn't want wine. 4 out of 10 will not play again. Like it's fine. You're gonna get that every time. So, but yeah, I mean, it will be disproportionately negative, though, if you toss out a objectively bad game that you should have not put out. I mean, like consumers are brutal, but they also react to the product you put out, right? Like we have, on Calico, it's like, I don't know, 500 reviews on Steam, something like that. 93, I haven't looked today, percent of them are positive and really helpful and supportive. Yeah, and like 7 of them are bad. And of those 7, 5 are legitimate concerns that, it's great. You didn't like it. That's fine. That's what the review system's for. And 2 are just literally fucking shitheads that are on there to be shitheads. And that 2 is going to be there all the time.
Yeah.
Actually, I completely unironically stole that from Billie Eilish. Minty, it can't be your TikTok name because Coochie Destroyer 420 is Billie Eilish's nickname on TikTok, which is amazing. Anyway.
Very good.
She might have changed it by now, but it's on you can check it. It's pretty good.
Yeah, man, that's a world I'm very far from in terms of.
Oh God, I still don't even understand Snapchat. I'm like a 50-year-old desiccated corpse when I get on there and just like, am I doing this right?
I mean, not to keep going on tangents and bringing this up, but it's been such a good talking. Like, how do you then, as a publisher, keep abreast of, like, I mean, this is a very cheesy way, but like, staying relevant, like being aware of TikTok, like, not that like you're okay boomer, but
in there, Brian over there called me a boomer all the time.
It's not just being aware of and throwing an ad onto TikTok that's going to make it successful on the platform, but like, how do you stay tapped into that kind of stuff?
So 2 ways: hire smarter people than me.
Gotcha. Good strategy.
Hire younger people than me. And I'm trying to see, you have all of your curse words blocked, or maybe I do.
Oh no, I just click the permission and it'll go. Just type whatever you want. It doesn't matter.
That's the best part. No, I was looking to see what people are saying. Anyway, I'm trying to unblur the scrambled channels. There you go. There's an age marker. Channel on television. Anyway, yeah, I mean, conferences help. Listening helps. Being empathetic and listening always helps in every situation. Sometimes if I find myself talking too much, like just, shutting up sometimes is useful, right? Like, people are scared of silence. So it is amazing how much people will just volunteer if you just stop talking. I don't know, I mean, don't be, psychopathic and not, just look at the floor. But exactly there, we fill air, right? With qualifiers. We do that all the time. And so when people pitch and talk about, you can ask a super leading question like, oh, how are you promoting the game? And they're literally, as long as you stay quiet and listen and nod, they're going to give you like down to like how they schedule their tweets.
Right.
Like and so, I mean, honest probing questions and just being honest and listening to people, I think helps an awful lot. There's also great resources in this industry because we've started, this is maybe a slightly nasty thing to say, but it's not meant to be. There's a little piece of academia in games. And the whole thing about academia, and I say this with some qualification, I've got a doctorate in cognitive science. The whole thing about academia is like prestige. That's all it is. So even how you're done in tenure is the amount of prestige you have. Literally, they're counting how many people cited your papers, how many people cited your book, things like that to give you your tenure status. And so the whole goal is to, be a published scholar and bring prestige to the institution. And so in games, we're starting to see a little bit of that with like people who just exclusively do GDC talks.
Right.
There are several folks, prominent indies even, who, have like an amazingly large follower count on Twitter, an amazingly large, series of GDC talks they've given, whatever, but have like legitimately not worked on a game in like a decade. Yep. And it's sort of like, what are you doing? But anyway, so there's a lot of that in games. And the thing that I think developers should take from it is the content, right? So there's a lot of people who are very good at what they do. And in order to kind of fluff the resume, literally create wonderful, wonderful, wonderful guides to every little thing they do. There are like Derek Liu, probably the best trailer guy in the industry, just has a whole fucking ass page on the current requirements for every single console systems trailer. Like, to the point, it's so reliable, we look at it before we look at the back end on Steam.
Right.
And so that's kind of one of the best ways to learn, right? So I think Sam, she's in the chat. I think one of the people you follow is like Vicky Tran. She's really amazing. Works at used to be at KidFox. She's at the people who make Among Us now, social media manager and community manager. And so, you know, you look to people who are very good at what they do and listen. I mean, I think that's just generally how you get better at any job. So I'm, you know, slightly out of touch with social media, mostly because I find it a depressing hellscape.
Yeah.
But, you know, and Twitter's always kind of been my thing, so I kind of stick around that. But yeah, I find a few people that are, yeah, my PhD supervisor always called me a vampire. I find people who are like better than me at what I am doing currently, and then I eat them alive and go past them. So, you know, not in a cruel way. I am Canadian. I'll apologize on the way out the door. But it, yeah, I mean, before I pull the shirt over your head, it's just sorry. But you know, like it is what it is. But I mean, that's business, right? Like it's learn, surpass. That's you know, be an active listener, I guess, is the short answer to this very, 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 very short question that I have talked about for half an hour.
Right on. Yeah, it's good business advice. I mean, it's good life advice, even. I mean, outside of business, just to listen to people and take in everything you can, and it helps you grow. Because there's like I find there's not a lot of educational opportunities once you leave school. And
yeah, I'm always amazed at how like high school students are so resistant to learning, and I'm like, do you have any idea how fucking ecstatic I would be if someone literally paid me to sit and learn? Oh, hey Shaq, I didn't know you were in there. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, that would be like my dream, like being paid to learn. Like what? That's absurd. Past high school, you have to pay other people to teach you.
Right.
Like, you know, and even then, even if the really sad part is when you get to the point in your life where you're making enough money that it's reasonable for you to do that, you don't have any time anymore. Like, oh, cool, I'll just go get an MBA between this company of 16 that I run and my 2 kids and my life. Like, when the fuck am I going to do that? I can barely even get to the gym anymore. I used to look like a boxer, and now I look like a bagel with an elastic around it because I have 2 kids and my diet consists entirely of whatever they don't eat. So, you know, like, I mean, there's no time becomes your premium, not money. So it's remarkable to me that people are frustrated about learning. Like I would relish the opportunity to take time to learn something new.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I started this show. It's just you know, the opportunity to talk to people, opportunity to learn, hear different sides of the business, hear different opinions, and I really want to thank you for coming on. It's been super fun hearing, and I appreciate how goddamn candid you've been, both in terms of all the details, and it's been really great.
Yeah, we don't have much to hide over here. It's pretty open book. Our Discord, where we do our public, we do hide some rooms because of you know, NDAs and things that we can't violate. So like when we're talking about porting something to Switch, for example, we can't start sharing Nintendo Switch code in a public forum. But you know, I mean, the Discord you're in that we chat in, that's our work Discord. We're literally working in there. So
the porting stuff is a whole side that we didn't even get to touch on. So, but I've got some questions about it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. If people now suddenly want to throw game pitches at you, where should they go?
Yeah, just hello at WhiteThornDigital.com.
Hello at WhiteThornDigital.com.
Yeah. We, you know, are happy to look at whatever. We're not, full disclosure, we're probably being very conservative in 21 because 2020 was a literal fucking dumpster fire. So if my answer is I don't have enough money for this year because we're trying to be conservative, that's on honest answer. We have you know, again, a lot of stuff got slid ahead because of the nightmare that was last year. You know, we've had just me, Katie and I, my wife and I, had 6 family members get coronavirus, one of whom died.
I'm sorry.
He was an older guy, so something was going to get him, but it was kind of unfortunate that it had to be coronavirus. We've had several developers lose immediate family members. You know, so we're in it's been a year, so consequently, a lot of this stuff. Oh, Panda, it's all right. It's my was my wife's grandfather, so it's He was in a nursing home that got just absolutely eradicated by coronavirus. But in any case, I appreciate the sympathy. But yeah, so it hasn't been a wonderful year. So we have had to, and we're not, and I've said this in public forums before, like one of the things that really, and I mentioned this openly to Taurus on Twitter, one of the things that I really don't like in the contract is the like penalties for late things,
Mm-hmm.
because one of the worst things in our entire industry is setting a launch date for something early in development. It's like
Right.
it's like the Windows file transfer dialog, right? Like, you remember that back in like Windows XP? I'm going to drag these files over to the desktop. 2 minutes left, 14 hours left, 1 minute left, 63 days left. That's games,
Yeah.
right? Like, when is it going to be done? I have no idea. And so consequently, when we're signing people, we literally will ask you, like, what is a ballpark? Give me like first half or second half of what year? And then let's math back what you need, and that's what I'm going to pay you every month. So, if we were to say, I see B and not BU, the other B in the chat, which is a dev of one of our titles. If when we signed that game, their game, we were like, what's the day you're launching this game?
Mm-hmm.
And if you pass it every day, we're going to start billing you a tick. Like, that's awful. You're adding additional stress to something that's already stressful. So, hey. So what we try to do, is negotiate with them broadly. When are you going to launch this game? Broadly, super broadly. Give me 3 months in either direction, just somewhere in there. And, once we start getting into that realm, then we start narrowing and whittling down. Okay. When do we start solidifying? And then we work together toward that. And we're very careful not to make commitments that are going to put. Sometimes we do have to take a stressful commitment. That's unfortunate, but it's the way the platforms work. If we get an opportunity to be like, last minute, somebody at Steam says, "Hey, we're going to do this amazing, match 3 game spot. And if you want to launch into it, you got to get us a build in by this date." And it's like, well, fuck. Like, we don't want to crunch the devs, but that means you're going to be on the front page of Steam for a week, which is like, you can't buy that level of exposure.
Mm-hmm.
So in the past, when this has happened to avoid crunch, Calico, we literally gave Kels, who runs that company, 30 employees at our expense for a month to bang out the stuff that needed to be banged out to hit the target without them working 90 hours a week.
Right.
We'll make it work. So anyway, timelines and penalties. That's what really frustrates me. So as a result, you could say it's bad business because now we have all these games in 2021, but now it means they're all going to launch when the devs are thinking about that and not their dead relatives. So it's like it's a flip side.
Yeah.
This is a bit like the curation and algorithmic thing. I don't know that I'm right. I mean, I think I'm right. I mean, my wife would tell you that I always think I'm right. But I don't know that. I could be dead wrong, and being strict and psychopathic could be the way to do it. But I mean, I literally wrote a book. It's on the shelf somewhere. This is not a book plug. This thing's like $8. Actually, no, it's way overpriced for what it is because it's an academic text. But I wrote a book about leaving the games industry that I literally called Breaking Out of the Games Industry. That was a talk where I interviewed something like 15 devs, and then I put 6 of the interviews in the book from major companies around the world that left the games industry on various terms. Some are good, most are not. And it's basically it's like an anthology of crunch. And sort of what that does to people. One of the fellows in here was like working on localizing a Korean MMO to North America through, I think, Bandai. Yeah, and I mean, he flipped his car 14 times on the 405 in LA because he fell asleep at the wheel going 70. Because, he worked a 120-hour week in the Korean time zone. So that's what happens. People, yeah, so that's basically what this book is about. And it talks about unionization and that kind of deal. So, yeah, so crunch is antithetical, and people, it's so funny. Like, I remember I yelled at one of our devs when they were like, "This feels awful crunchy," and I was like, motherfucker, 40 hours of work a week is not crunch. That's just working a normal goddamn job. Like it, so anyway, we like, we'll get a little bit brusque about that, but we, like the week leading up to launch, I mean, you're going to work a 50, 60-hour week for like 2 weeks. That's not crunch, man. Crunch is 5 years at 120 hours until you flip your car. And I mean, to be clear, I realize there's a slippery slope where if we let a little overtime happen, then eventually it becomes a lot. But we always do plan for everybody, no matter what game, that the 2 weeks prior to the launch of a game are just going to be bad. It's the 2 weeks, not the 2 years. Because I don't believe overtime is bad. Every job in the world offers overtime. I believe planning in systemic overtime for your entire workforce is bad.
Right.
There's a very different thing between incidental overtime because of a crisis, which numerous jobs have. Think of doctors, lawyers, teachers, people that have to do extra because something went wrong. But that's not what the games industry does, right? Like we plan in like, oh, well, what if we are going to miss the release date? Well, we'll just work everybody triple time. The end. Like that's what we try to avoid, we don't want to have layoff pizza parties or anything like that and have people leave screaming. We had a crying room at PlayStation. That was pretty cool. Called it a breastfeeding room, but you can't bring your baby to work. You could pump, of course, but the alarming majority of folks just went in there to get away from everybody and scream when you were crunching horribly. That's not uncommon, by the way, so I'm not singling out PlayStation here. Like a lot of developers, call centers, they're really common. It's just a room with like white noise and pillows, and you just scream.
Yeah. That's a nightmare. Yeah, man. I've been an independent person working in my office in my home for my entire life, and
I want to be clear to the chat that's like blowing up. That's not just any one developer. Like that's not PlayStation's fault. That's not CD Projekt Red. That's not any office environment that systemically works people has one of these. Like I worked at an Allstate insurance company tech center when I was in college. Crying room. Because literally all day you just get customers calling in and screaming at you, and like they're serious. They're everywhere. This is not unique to PlayStation, so I'm not singling them out. This is a problem with capitalism, not a problem with PlayStation. Exactly that. Kittens, exactly that. And so it's not ever called the crying room. That's like colloquial, but it's like that. It's a room that's a quiet place with a book and a TV and a comfy couch and a soundproof door.
Man,
usually like one of those occupied locks.
Right. Goddamn. Yeah. So, I mean,
the
cheers,
fridge. Exactly. I worked at a Tim Hortons when I was in high school. Yeah, you'd close yourself in the fridge and scream when you. Yeah, that's real common.
Big
like I said, that's not a problem with PlayStation. That's a problem with capitalism. It's
what happens when two of you need to cry at once?
It hasn't happened yet. I don't want to know.
Oh man, that's brutal, and I'm kind of glad that through steps of transparency and good faith work, cutting down a little bit on that in terms of the total workforce. That stuff may still exist in the AAA world, but goddamn, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that in the indies.
A weird thing. I don't know what the exact perfect size is. I mean, I think we'd probably get up to 50 and change and stop. Probably as big as I'd ever get. 30 to 60. That window is probably where I really like. I worked at Volition for a while, and they were about 100 at the time, and I think that was pretty good. It was big enough that you knew everybody, but it was also big enough that they could take on a big project.
Right.
Like a big Saints Row. Any bigger than that, I think you start getting into what they call in economics diseconomy of scale, where you end up spending more money managing than you do actually making projects, just because of the natural curve of how much extra work you get out of every employee versus how much extra paperwork. And then what ends up happening is when you have to hire an employee to handle the paperwork, that employee creates it's this. I can literally show you a curve that they use to map this out, and that when you start approaching that, you'll feel it. You'll be like, I've hired 3 extra people and our productivity went up 4%. How did that happen? But it's because you start taking on all this extra work. So I don't know what the perfect size is. But I can tell you, like, watching like Red Dead get developed by 3,800 people, and
Yeah,
like one
right
person's
about it.
full-time job is just work on fucking making horse dicks realistic, is like not what I would call a dream job.
Yeah, no,
Um,
they had two
you
guys
know,
who worked on grass.
one of the people I interview in this book, uh, since what did he spent his entire like a 2-year period placing billboard trees manually in a racing game for the Sega Dreamcast, because Speed Tree and like the
Right,
concept
that shit
of
hadn't.
procedural generation was like very new, right? Like it didn't hit until like 2006-7. So you didn't just have like, oh, just type in a seed and populate a world with dynamically rendered trees with AI. Did not exist. So it's like a popular racing game on the Dreamcast. They hired one employee, Nigel Kershaw, in his book, who literally sat there and placed specific, just 2 years, literally just trees.
Just make the
And that
horse
to
better.
me sounded so depressing. I nearly cried. I was just like,
Yeah,
God damn.
nobody gets into games because that's what they want to do. Nobody wants to like be the person modeling rocks for the first-person shooter.
Right. Like, who wakes up and goes, man, I sure do want to place trees for 2 straight years. Like,
Yeah,
South Park kart racing.
yeah. But that's the thing, though. I mean, these things that are, um, they're super shitty jobs, but they're also super like the AAA world can't exist without these individuals.
Right. So, God, I'm going to sound like Karl fucking Marx here. You're getting into like a core problem with capitalism, right?
Yeah,
Again, I'm not trying to just fucking put a
it's okay,
hammer
Kami.
and
Let's go.
I was gonna say, I'm not trying to put a hammer and sickle on my sleeve here or anything. But think about it for a minute. I mean, if you look at this pandemic, look at how quickly unskilled labor got rebranded as essential worker. Like, did you see how quick that gaslighting happened? It was like 5 fucking seconds from your elected officials saying unskilled labor deserves unskilled wages to saying the country cannot function without these essential workers. Look at these heroes. Like, what? It was an instant. It was like a microsecond. And that, I mean, by itself lays naked bare just the hypocrisy of that terming in the first place. You fully recognize that the world cannot exist without people sewing textiles and paving roads and picking vegetables. In California, after the Trump administration, the year we were living there, when they first, last year I was there, was 2016. And the border wall kind of stupidity started happening, and ICE really ramped up, being racist fucks more than usual, and started just grabbing people left, right, and center. And California literally had a fucking produce shortage because plants were rotting on the vine because they couldn't pay Californians enough to pick the fruit. Like, this literally lays bare just the most basic parts of your everyday. You hold up a smartphone, right? And that thing is full of so many rare earth minerals that are necessary for this thing to function. There's neodymium in there, there's cadmium in there, there's cobalt in there. And these are pulled out of the ground by workers in Azerbaijan making fucking $2 an hour, and you can't exist without them. And so there's something fundamentally unfair about it. And I think games show that off in the same way. We know someone somewhere has to put all of these fucking hubcaps on the 7,000 different varieties of car in Grand Theft Auto.
Right.
Those hubcaps are not going to paint themselves. That's the least glamorous job, and it's paid the least. But without it, you get fucking Coochie Destroyer showing up in your Steam reviews being like, oh, I paid $60 for this game, lazy devs. And that's the world you end up in. And so there's something fundamentally broken about that the people that are most, you can hear my Nova Scotia R, huh? My wife makes fun of me about that, B. But you can't possibly exist without those people. Like, they are literally that, like if you build a pyramid, right? Like, the stones at the bottom matter the most. And yet, like, pay them the worst.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's tricky. Yeah. I mean, I could talk about this for 6 months. So, we have kittens you will love. One of our favorite things to do, because we're sort of a troll brand sometimes, is just, as you saw that in that tweet I sent, is just put people who give reviews like that just on absolute blast, because I love doing it. So we had one person, I think it was Brian's game, that replied, and his name on Xbox was Gooch Grabber 2. And he literally left this review that was like, devs don't know how to make a fucking game, just stupid trash review. But anyway, we put it on. I say Given Kittens is who I'm referring to. I'm sorry if I'm saying kittens. Yeah. But anyway, I put it on Twitter, and I was like, I don't know where we'd be without the steadfast counsel of Gooch Grabber 2. And then later that week, we did it again, and we were like, the best part about this tweet is that were Gooch Grabber and Gooch Grabber 1 taken? Like, is that anyway?
His first 2 accounts got banned.
Yeah. Oh God. So anyway, so that we that was one of our many exploits. Yeah. But so anyway, follow the Twitter account. If I had to plug one thing, we really do like roast those bad reviews regularly. One of my colleagues, when I was more of an academic, she studied a PhD in psychology. She studied Leah Fredman. She studied toxicity in games in online communities, and it's really common. I think this was her frontispiece. So there's a thing in a thesis called a frontispiece. I've got one back there. When you do your PhD thesis, typically the first page is like a piece of art that you commission from somebody to draw something about relevant to your life. It's an old-timey thing. Yeah, if you ever look at like the complete works of Shakespeare, it has that big, like, beautiful fresco on the front page kind of thing. So hers was a screenshot. It was toxicity that she was, studying, and it was just a screenshot of an Xbox Live avatar waving and smiling that says, "I hope you die of Lou Gehrig's disease, bitch." And that was her frontispiece that she put in her thesis. And I just, oh my God, there's so much of that kicks around, and it seems to bubble to the top. I don't know. It's a combination of like anonymity and adolescent male anger, I think.
Yeah. Man.
Gooch
Gamers.
Grabber 2000.
Gamers.
Love how your chat has just turned into Coochie Destroyer Gooch Grabber. Like, it's just,
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry. What have I done?
No, it's okay. It's a resurgence from. Don't ask them about the crotch Cheeto. Yeah, the animations sometimes don't look what they look like.
We had some interesting. So one of the things we actually left in, kittens. I used to wish minor inconveniences on people was one of the things I would do on Xbox Live. I'd be like, I hope someone breaks into your house and moves everything an inch to the left, and you can't figure it out for months, and just like stupid shit like that. But yeah. Anyway, crotch Cheeto. Sorry, now I'm lost over here. Yeah, anonymity. Yep.
Dark sounds good.
Have I had any issue throwing in the spotlight? No. So what we typically do is, we're kind. So we block out their name. We don't mention what game it's from or where they can find it. We don't want to like dox anybody. We don't. I'm not trying to like hurt the person. I'm more just trying to make light of it. It's more of it's a therapeutic thing for other devs, because I've got a pretty thick skin. You can light me up all you want. And I'm like the most privileged group in society as a mostly straight white dude who's not, poor. Like I'm invincible. You can roast me all day and it doesn't hurt my feelings too much. But there's a lot of devs out there that don't have that luxury, right? And so when someone shows up at something that matters a lot to them and just absolutely fuck them up, like, it hurts their feelings a lot. So for us, it's more therapeutic to just put the stupid reviews on blast. Just kind of, you have to laugh at it. It's going to happen, that kind of thing. But we're always really careful to make sure we're, blacking out names and dates and things like that to make sure we don't want anybody to, weirdo on Twitter to like follow them home or something. But we do want to make light of it, because, that's one of the only ways to tolerate it, right? If you can't laugh, you'd cry.
In the breastfeeding room.
In the pumping room. Yeah. The funny thing too is, like, at the studio I was at, we had this as a pumping room, and it's like we had like 3 female employees, like to the point where there were women's bathrooms And then one women's bathroom had a big sign on it that said, "No guys, seriously, this one is actually the woman's bathroom." Because most of them, just anybody would
Right.
use them, because there was literally 3 female employees and like 87 males. So it was like, we're just going to use the women's bathroom because this, we're not going to wait in line for 6 hours. Like but yeah, so silly stuff. It's like, oh yeah, and we have yeah, you get it. Same kind of thing. So we're trying our best to make that not the case at our studio. I'm pleased to say we have a very diverse crew of employees. Do our damnedest to hire and promote and sign games from folks that are in diverse, underrepresented groups wherever we possibly can. Certainly, we're not going to turn down a game just because the developer's a white dude. We're not that guy. But at the same time, we are absolutely mindful of the fact that, as I said, I think early at the beginning of this, or maybe that was a different interview. You have the same dude making games, you get the same games. If you don't diversify, you get the same content over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, with that, again, I guess hit the folks with, and we really will sign off now because we are an hour over. But it's been so good talking, dude.
Thanks. Empress in the chat talking karaoke. Here, let me workshop this idea that B and I had. We are going to pay for a thing with the City of Erie's Tourism Bureau where we fly indies here, and in our recording studio at our headquarters, we get them blasted drunk and sing karaoke with them, and then in between karaoke rounds, we talk indie topics, sort of like this. What do you think? Do it? Yeah.
I mean,
you can do it. I mean, if you think it.
I mean, I love talking. I don't know what I don't know how good I am karaoke drunk, but
no, that's the point. It's supposed to be bad. Yeah, I mean, and then we have like an actual video crew edit it, and they can auto tune you, I guess, if you're that bad. But everyone's bad at karaoke.
Right. So I guess look forward to that soon, gang.
Yeah.
And
Lost a Groove on PS1. Yes.
Right on.
I love that.
So guys, WhiteThorn, go buy all the games on Steam. Follow the Twitter account.
Sure.
Send your pitches to hello@WhiteThorn. And
yes, hello@whitethorndigital.com. Or rate on Twitter. I mean, that's fine too.
Yeah, just drop the exe on Twitter, and it'll be good.
The DMs are open.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, thank you so much for coming on, guys. I'm really glad to be back with the show. Super glad to have you all in chat. Thank you, everybody, all the newcomers in the chat. It's been really nice. Thank you for the raid. And I'm gonna throw you on. Thanks for watching. Tomorrow, we're gonna do more virtual pet work. And I think right now I'm going to throw you guys to Riggy, because he is playing Always Sometimes Monsters, and we got to support that. So I appreciate you guys, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.
Take it easy, guys.